changing. Your sons and your daughters are behind your command. Old road is rapidly aging. Please get out of the new one if you can lend your hand. The times they are a-changing. Yes, sir, folks. They are really changing. I tell you, I can't keep up with it all. The times they are a-changing. Well, so thank you, Mr. Robert Zimmerman, for that little ditty, aka Bob Dylan. I am sure that that tune will be good for a few more changes yet in the future. Well, I'm telling you, things really are changing. As you all know, Green Garden Guys channel here has been a general audience channel since the very beginning. I've tried not to cuss. I try not to cover anything that is, too risque or so on. I try to keep my line on all this because I want as many people as possible to feel comfortable with watching this channel. With the fact that Canada has now, put a cannabis leaf on their flag and taken down the maple leaf, and so it's legal to get high in Canada these days. Pretty much the entire West Coast, Alaska, Washington, Oregon, California, all of them have legalized recreational cannabis. They have mostly long had medical cannabis in those areas. There's quite a few other states across the United States that may be considering this, or they definitely have medical programs, so it's happening, folks. And so, as far as the rest of this video is concerned, if you live in a state where cannabis is still illegal, scurry on off to the garden somewhere and work on your tomatoes, do something else, pay no attention to what I have to say. This message really is for people who live in the legal states and people who use cannabis as medicine, and people who live in legal countries like Canada, and so, I don't want to disturb anybody. My personal opinion is that this is long overdue. That was the silliest thing ever that they tried to legalize that plant. It ain't gonna kill nobody, provided you stay out from behind your car and you don't try to use a meat slicer, if you've used the stuff. And it has a lot of good medicinal values and so on. So I've long wondered what was wrong with our government and the way we look at things, that they made so much trouble for so many people over this silly herb. Really, the whole thing is completely silly. But there's still a lot of people in the U.S. that take this very seriously. But for the rest of you, I think it's time, if you're also over 21, check the box. Are you over 21? Come on in. I'd like to discuss the subject because, I don't know, maybe it's better you get it from me, At least I think it is. And so what I'd like to talk about here today is cannabis seeds. How do you get a cannabis seed? That's the first step. If you're lucky enough to have put some Acapulco Gold seeds or some Vietnamese black seeds into the freezer back in 1967 and they're still intact today, well, you're in luck. You got some seed that you could use. As for the rest of us, most all cannabis today is domestically grown. And the domestic product is considered only acceptable when it is seedless, as in the Spanish simsimilla. Okay, and so you really can't get anything out of a bag of cannabis today from your dispensary that will allow you to grow some in the garden. And since people watching this channel are pretty much gardeners. I bet any money that if you're going to get into this idea, you're going to want to plant seeds. And so you can't go to, Burpees or someplace and get your Acapulco Gold seeds. That ain't going to happen. So you're going to have to go through specialized, companies that deal in this. So the first thing, cannabis is such a gray area today. Oh my God, every county, every state has their own laws and so on. And you cross the state line, and one place you can stand on the corner smoking a reefer, and the next place they're going to put you in jail because you even touched the stuff. Considering how gray and ambiguous the laws are at the moment until things begin to standardize, the question rises. Is it even legal to buy cannabis seed? There was a time when all of the cannabis we had in the U.S. was grown in foreign nations. It was what we called Landrace cannabis, which meant that it was a plant that had been grown in specific locations around the globe by farmers in that area for maybe thousands of years. And they were inbred races that were quite stable, and each area kind of had its own. And so back in the 60s or the 50s when you bought cannabis, you probably got some that came from Mexico or from Panama. In the 60s, military personnel brought it home from Vietnam and so on. The Thai stick was a popular item and so on. So most cannabis used to be foreign grown, and most cannabis was full of seeds. And so if you wanted to grow your own, all you do is reach in there, pull some seeds out and put them in the ground, and boom, you had plants. They may or may not have worked well in your environment because they were genetically adapted to certain conditions, and mostly tropical environments. But that's no longer true. We import almost no cannabis today, and like I say, it's all seedless. So if you want to start growing cannabis from seeds, you're going to have to go to a place where you can buy cannabis seeds. And, for some of us who grew up in the 50s and 60s and the Beat generation and the hippie days where we used to just, flip the seeds out of the car window, it seems kind of atrocious to have to pay the prices they ask for the seed. But it is worth it if you do your gardening well. I mean, it's the only way you're going to be able to get the stuff today, mostly. The question is the seed legal? Well, it looks that way. Now, I'm not going to stake, all right? I'm not going to stake on this because it is such a complicated mass of laws. But because of industrial hemp being legalized, and because of the fact that so many of us eat hemp seeds in our granola, and so on, cannabis has come into food and health products in such a way. I believe I have hemp oil soap in the bathroom, for instance, from Dr. Bronner's. And so it's really working its way into the marketplace. Because of that, the laws do support the motion and the possession of seeds for cannabis. And so, as far as I can see, you won't have to worry about going to jail if you happen to own a cannabis seed. Cannabis seeds contain no THC anyway. All right, they're devoid of any drug activity. More or less, they're good food. So let's go past that one and say, yeah, it is legal. Now, the biggest problem is then, where the heck do you get them? Now, if you live in one of the states where it's illegal to possess or grow it, you can have the seed, but you can't plant it. Now, if you live in California, or if you're here in Hawaii with a medical card and so on, if you have these seeds, yeah, you can plant them. Well, unfortunately, Hawaiian law did not allow for the dispensaries here to sell the seeds. Kind of a silly oversight as far as I'm concerned. But it is possible to get your seeds from other sources. And today, California, for instance, has a number of seed houses. So, for instance, with a medical card, if you live in a state where it's legal technically you can bring seeds from California into that state without getting in trouble. Although, if they're sent through the post office, it goes interstate and it's a real mess, okay? The one thing that for sure is illegal, and they do not allow cannabis seeds to be brought in from outside the United States. Well, it's sad because most of the best seed houses are in Europe. The Netherlands have been well established. Spain has a number of excellent seed houses for this purpose. So they will take your order. They will run your credit card, and they will attempt to ship you the seeds in what they call stealth packaging. So it doesn't have a big pot leaf on the outside and so on. But if for some reasons U.S. Customs finds out that you ordered seeds from Netherlands, at the very least, they're going to confiscate them and throw them in the pile with the rest of the stuff to be burned. Now, if you are in California or Oregon or Washington, you all have dispensaries there that sell both plants and seeds generally, and it's perfectly legal for you to walk in and buy that seed and to plant it. In some localities, under certain conditions, this is all still so crazy. Check the laws. Check the laws, and after you check them, double check them, triple check them, hire a lawyer to look at them, because nobody understands what's going on there. So don't feel bad if you're confused. There are a whole bunch of different operations in business, both domestically and out of the country, that do cannabis genetics. Some are better than others. They specialize in different ways for different types of cannabis and so on. But there are people out there that are holding seed, breeding seed, and so on. Generally, you can't go directly to the breeders, but you will be able to find seeds, maybe at your local dispensaries, or you can go online. Like I say, California's got plenty of them. Grower's Choice, that's one in California, for instance, that does fine business. You can order from them. The next step is, man, is it confusing? There are so many different names and types and varieties, and it's feminized, and it's autoflowering, and it's Landrace, and it's regular, and so on. It's pretty confusing if you've not been around with this for years and understand what that's all about. And then the names, of course, Boba Kush, Nova OG, White Widow. It's got all these crazy ass names. So it's you have to look at it and do your research, and also if you have dispensaries, talk to the people there. They're well educated, most of them, on this subject, so they can usually help. But I mean, cannabis comes in for medicinal uses or recreational uses in two basic types. And it's what we call sativa and indica. Cannabis sativa generally has the more narrow leaves, lankier looking plants, and the reaction you will get from it if you ingest it is more cerebral. It's more of a thought thing, maybe euphoric, elevating, stimulate creative thinking, blah, blah, blah. If it's a really potent African race, well, then you're going to get an LSD-like experience, maybe. Soldiers in Vietnam used to end up in the medic tent with psychotic reactions from some of the stuff they grew in South Asia over there, because it was, bad trip. It was really that strong. That's not very common today with the varieties that we have in the U.S. But so you have the sativas, then you have the indicas, and the indicas generally have the broader leaves, and they tend to be more narcotic in action, or that is, as the users like to call it, they give you couch lock. Okay, you can't move. Great analgesic, is good for sleep, good for pain, stuff like that. But you may not be able to operate after smoking indicas or eating indicas. So there's two basic divisions right there, and that's just the basic genetics of the plant. There are other species, but I'm not going to talk about them quite here. Mostly we're looking at sativas and indicas and the different reactions. And a lot of the stuff that's for sale today is also a mix of the two, because there's so many hybrids out there. So you got to study each and every variety, and talk to the people in the dispensaries to see, if it's insomnia that you have, or if you have arthritic pain. There are different types that work better for these things than others. If you're just trying to get bombed, well, if you're a newbie, you better stick with this stuff that's probably a lower THC content, under 14 or 15%. Anything that starts to jet over 20%, you better be a well-accomplished user, because it's going to kick your socks right off, mama. So, potency is an issue. Also, we have strains today that contain CBD. Everybody knows about CBD by now, right? It's become a national rage, CBD. Well, it's a natural cannabinoid in the cannabis plants, and some of the races that you can buy are actually bred so that they are almost all CBD and very little THC. CBD doesn't have a psychoactive thing like THC does, and so you don't really get high on it. Now, it's analgesic. It will help kill pain. It tends to be really good for killing anxiety, so it's very good for purposes like that. The CBD strains are. And then there are some strains out there that have high percentages of both. But most of the stuff today that was bred for the recreational industry, it's just way high on the THC end and very low on the CBD end, which can be a problem too. That is not the case with the old Landraces we had years ago. This was all done by American breeders who, without thinking about what they were doing, in my opinion, bred out most of the CBD out of the plant. CBD is essential, really, to balance the reaction of the THC, so you have a wonderful and pleasant experience, rather than gnawing your teeth with anxiety and paranoia, thinking that they're coming to get you. This can happen on very, very large doses of THC. So, sativas, indicas, different reactions with both, different looks, different growth habits. CBD strains, no psychoactive reaction whatsoever, or some are balanced, and so then you get this balance between the different cannabinoids, or they're real high in THC. Then the next thing you will run across if you're out there shopping is the seed will be feminized. Okay, and so this is done with a trick of the breeding, the way the guys set the seed up, so that cannabis usually is dioecious. It's just two different plants. One is a male, one is a female. Okay, and with the feminized strains, which are so many of them today, they don't produce male plants. Okay, they only produce female plants. The seed is a little more expensive. But if you're not interested in creating your own seed stock, they can be economical, because every plant is going to turn into a product for you. They have negatives too, though, as far as I'm concerned, because you have to go back to the source every time then, unless you're maintaining a bank of clones under lights or something. It is possible to take a feminized race and start making cuttings from it and keep them under long day lights, so they remain juvenile and they don't mature. So if you get like 18-hour day lights over the top of your clones, they're not going to flower. They're going to remain in the juvenile vegetative state, and so you can kind of continuously make cuttings and maintain a strain that way. But I really, that's a lot more messing around than just taking some seeds and putting them in an envelope for a while till you need them next time. And so that's where the regular strains come in. Any cannabis that's sold as called regular means that it will be roughly 50-50 male and female plants are going to come out of the seeds. And so you need to learn to tell the difference between them, okay, to begin with. And one male will go a long ways, okay, into pollinating the females. And if you let all the females get hit by the male, you're going to have a bunch of seedy old stuff that look like a brick of moldy Mexican from 1965, you know. So you want to control any pollen by isolating the males, introducing them perhaps only to specific branches on your females. So if you are interested in keeping your own seed, then you will have to take a male of the same variety as the one that you are pollinating, the female, and introduce the pollen from the male to the female. You probably want to only do that on a few branches in the plant, so you can get some seed for the next generation. That's called line breeding or inbreeding. That will maintain the race exactly as you purchased it. On the other hand, it's entirely possible to take two races of cannabis and bring them together to create a hybrid. So you're going to get something different. You might have, one that's short and stocky and another one that's long, lanky, and late. And so by bringing the two together, maybe you make a plant that's a little bit more compact, maybe held some of the benefits of the taller variety and so on. It gets pretty complicated. You can breed for flavor, you can breed for smell, you can breed for all kinds of things. Cannabis is quite flexible that way. So it's possible on one female, by doing your labeling and by introducing the males and then taking them away, to create one branch with one type of seed, another branch with another type of seed, and so on. So this kind of approach, by using regular seed, is going to allow you to maintain control over your cannabis genetics. Okay, because the way things have gone today in the United States with feminized seed, most places actually sell feminized seed, and so you're stuck having to go back to them if you need seed again. But if you use regular seed, you will be able to maintain your own genetic bank. So now a step beyond that is something that we call autoflowering. Long time ago, we used to call that day neutral. Anyway, what that means is that they've taken your Sativa or indica plant, and somewhere along the line of the breeding, they've worked in a certain amount of Cannabis ruderalis, which is really a non-psychoactive variety, but it does have this automatic nature of flowering when it has a certain age. And this can be to your advantage. Like, let's say you're growing outdoors, but you live in Washington, up north, or in Canada. Well, say you want to grow Thai, or you want to grow Maui Wowie, famous variety here from Hawaii. Well, these are tropical cannabises. They require long growing seasons, and then with the shortening of the days deep into fall in order to actually come to flower. And so they are what we call photoperiod plants. Okay, they rely on a certain day length trigger to get them to go into the flowering cycle. Well, a lot of these tropical varieties, man, it's going to be snowing in Washington by the time they get ready to start to bloom. But if you have, say, Maui Wowie that has been bred to ruderalis, so you have an auto-flowering form of Maui Wowie, well, it's just going to hit a certain height, take off, and start flowering for you, so you're going to be able to grow it in your garden in Canada. You know, that's an advantage to auto-flowering. For people who live in northern climates, you can raise some of the tropical races that have been bred to auto-flower. It also shortens up the whole process. It tends to make the plants smaller because they'll bloom much earlier on smaller bushes instead of having to get gigantic. You know, old-time Landrace cannabis used to be, a lot of it, huge. You know, just huge. The old Mexican stuff and Panamanian stuff and Thai stuff, those plants were enormous. And so they're not easy to hide. They don't fit into your grow room very well. They don't even fit into your garden because they're going to stick over the top of the fence. and they're probably not a good choice unless you happen to live somewhere in the tropics and way out in the country. So that autoflowering stuff can be really handy. Quick flowering, short stature plants, they really weren't seen too much in the United States till we started to see a lot of cannabis seed that came in from Afghanistan and Pakistan. They have varieties there that work that way. So then the one last thing about seed description, and that is Landrace. Okay. Like I say, today stuff is all hybridized. The seed you get, it may have parentage that's so complicated there can be 6 different types brought together to create this hybrid that you're growing. It does mean that it's unstable usually if it hasn't been line bred. So if you try to use the seed from it, it's going to revert. All right. But the old landraces, most of them didn't have any ruderalis. They were not autoflowering. They were dioecious, 2 different sexes. They were different than what we have today. A lot of this stuff was legendary. Folks who grew up during the 50s and 60s and had the experiences, this, that Michoacan was one form of Mexican, Acapulco Gold was another. Oaxaca made a different strain. Went to Panama, they had some different types there, and so on. And so there were these different land races, and each and every one of them was peculiar. It used to be that cannabis was much more different from each other, not only in the look, but also in the physical and mental reaction you got from it, than it is today. Today, as far as I'm concerned, at least, there's a whole lot of sameness, and part of that is because almost everything is grown in warehouses under lights. So it's all totally controlled conditions, like they're raising the stuff in a space station. There's no wind, there's no bugs, there's no soil fertility problems, there's no changes in earth, the ultraviolet light is steady and so on. You get out into the environment in the world, and so the weather's different, the soil's different, the nutrients are different, the farming practices are different, and so the cannabis would come out much, much more different from Panama. That was very different than what came from Vietnam, was different from what you'd find in Oaxaca, Mexico, and so on like that. There were very distinct differences in these land races, and so, and the old folks who were part of the Summer of Love, this, if you still happen to use the plant today, people who've been progressively with this all along probably don't notice this as much, and people that maybe are new to it as it started to liberalize today, you probably don't know this either, but if you were with it back in the 60s and you came back again after the turn of the century, you probably get your mind blown with how much the plant had changed. It has just changed dramatically. And so if you're seeking the old days, you're going to have to start to go looking for land races. On the other hand, if you're a modern guy, well, you're going to want to have the latest hybrids and so on. So it all depends on who you are, what you want, But the big problem with that is that we do have plenty of seed producers here in the United States that produce a lot of fine dandy hybrids, but we have very few houses where you can actually find a land race, a traditional Panama red seed or Santa Marta gold from Colombia, or one of these old time traditional varieties. If that's what you seek, you're probably going to end up having to violate the laws of the United States to get it, because it's available in Europe. It's illegal to bring it into the United States. These laws are crazy. There's a basic primer on buying cannabis seeds. How's that? I'm not going to go into how to grow them or any of that stuff right now. In fact, I may never do it because I don't want to turn this channel into a cannabis channel. We talk more about tomatoes and onions here than we talk about drugs. So, but like I said, It's becoming legal and liberalized across the U.S. It never should have been illegal like that in the first place. That was a real mistake, and it didn't work, did it? You know, prohibition didn't work on alcohol, prohibition didn't work on cannabis, and it's slowly showing up. So I am very much in favor of the fact that they're liberalizing this. Little by little, our federal government hasn't quite got their heads lined up straight, but it usually takes them longer than the common jackass to be able to get things straight anyhow. So, you know, long after I'm dead, no doubt they'll take it off Schedule 1 on the federal government, and so it'll be somebody else's issue. So if you have any other questions about those specific subjects, you know, of autoflowering as compared to feminized, as compared to regular, as compared to Landraces, and so on and so forth, I'll be glad to answer them. Basically just a primer about the seed itself. I hope I covered enough stuff that was interesting and important to you all. And for the rest of you who live in Kansas and other places like that, you know, please don't shoot. You know, honest, it's legal here. You know, so yeah, it's the greatest divide in the United States since the Civil War. I gotta laugh. I mean, it's pathetic. So what? The 21st century is going to be the century where I legally get to be stoned? I'm not impressed, frankly. I mean, it's about time. There's a whole lot of people today still sitting in prison because, well, truly, it is medicine. That's the reason I talk about it, is because it's really good for certain varieties for pain. You know. Anyway, aloha. Hang loose. Don't drop your cannabis seeds unless you're ready to plant them.